Hey, this is Gecko Mayhem. This is another Godforge video. Rifts are one of the more interesting systems Fateless has revealed recently. On paper, they sound great. A surprise boss encounter during dungeon farming that gives you a meaningful choice and a chance at extra rewards. The core idea is strong, but the current system could be improved. If the best answer is usually to bank the key and come back later, the risk versus reward side of it starts to fall apart. Rifts should be a challenge opportunity that rewards players for taking risk. As it is right now, the Rift system feels more like a bonus currency attached to dungeons that can be cashed in when you feel safe. First off, I want to be fair to the idea, because it has a good foundation. The point of Rifts is to make farming for skill-up materials feel more dynamic. Instead of going into a completely separate mode and spending energy there, a Rift has a small chance to appear while you're already doing dungeon content. If you choose to engage, you fight the Rift boss, then go on to finish the dungeon. If you succeed, you get extra value out of that run. That is a cool idea. It adds a layer of tension to content that might otherwise feel routine, and it creates a moment where the game suddenly asks you a question. Are you ready to face an extra challenge? That is why the concept is so strong. It's not just another passive progression system. It's meant to create a decision point, and ideally, a memorable one. The reason this matters is because challenges in games are not just about how difficult they are. They are about emotional payoff. A challenge starts to feel fun when the player is asked to make a meaningful decision. When there's some uncertainty around the outcome, success feels earned because it happened in that moment. And that is powerful. Think about some of those moments of triumph you've experienced in a game. It could be beating a boss you kept wiping to, or clearing a stage without saving along the way. It might be reaching the end of a challenge on hard difficulty, or solving a problem by changing your strategy or your team composition. The point is that a challenge feels rewarding when you actually overcome something. There is tension, commitment, and at the end, an emotional payoff. That is what Rifts and Godforge should be aiming for. They should not just be another source of material gathering. That's boring. They should feel like a little spike of danger and opportunity that rewards players for being prepared, adapting to the situation, and choosing to take that risk. The current version of the Rift system doesn't really force that moment of commitment. As it stands, if a Rift appears, you can choose not to engage, take a key, and come back later. I understand why this system exists. Time matters to people. A lot of players run dungeons because they want a smooth farming session. They may not want to stop and deal with a Rift boss right then and there, especially if their team is built for speed over stability. So yeah, I can absolutely see the benefit of keys from a convenience point of view. They let players keep moving and come back when it suits them. The problem is that once you give players that option, the system stops feeling like a challenge and starts feeling more like some kind of bonus currency attached to dungeons. Instead of asking, "Can I beat this now?" the system starts encouraging a different question. When is the safest and most efficient time to cash this in? And that is where the emotional payoff starts to disappear. If the smartest choice is to take the safer route, bank the key and use it later, the Rift loses its tension, becomes a delayed optimization system. And that is exactly why it feels lackluster. Not because the rewards are bad, but because the feature is drifting away from what makes this kind of challenge engaging in the first place. The problem is not that players are too cautious, it's that the system is teaching them to be cautious. The key issue is that the expected emotional payoff is missing. A Rift should feel like a rare moment where preparation, decision making, and risk all come together. If your team is ready and you engage the bonus boss, you should feel like you earned something. But if the reward can be delayed, the system loses a lot of what makes it special. It stops being about readiness or about solving the problem in front of you, and it starts being about whether you want to trade a bit more time now for more efficiency later. Don't get me wrong, that can still be useful, but useful is not the same as fun. Right now, Rifts risk feeling less like a challenge feature and more like a side currency system attached to dungeon farming, and that's a shame, because the idea itself has much more potential. Unless the best rewards are gained by taking the biggest risk, you may as well bypass Rift bosses altogether and just let players exchange keys at a shop for resources. And where's the fun in that? A successful Rift should leave the player feeling like they prepared, took the risk, and got rewarded for it. At the moment, it may leave the player feeling like they were handed free currency and spent it from a safe place. In my view, the most important fix is this. If a rift appears and I choose to do it immediately, I should be given the best version of the reward. That means the biggest dungeon reward bonus should be tied to attempting a rift when it appears. If I accept the challenge, beat the rift boss, and go on to finish the dungeon, that's when I should get the strongest payoff. That's what preserves the actual risk versus reward feeling. If I don't accept the challenge, that's on me. I may miss out on greater rewards, but I also may not feel like I'm up to the challenge, and that's okay. A key system is not inherently bad. Keys solve a real problem around time and convenience. If a player is in the middle of a long farming session, or they just don't have the time to deal with a rift, it's reasonable to have a way to preserve some of that opportunity. Some reward makes sense, and still feels good. But keys should be a fallback system, not the dominant strategy. If Fateless chooses to keep rift keys in the game, they should still let the player access rift rewards later, the pages, the skill up materials, essentially the core rift value, but they should not preserve the full bonus from immediate engagement. That way, player time is still respected, but the player is still rewarded for preparation, a willingness to engage, and the courage to take an immediate risk. The second big fix would be to put a cap on how many keys players can save. Unlimited storage creates too many bad incentives. It encourages stockpiling and waiting for ideal conditions before cashing in. It also opens the door to players hoarding keys for easier bosses or more favorable situations later on. A cap would not remove flexibility, but it would create pressure on players to actually engage with the system. At some point, they would have to decide whether to use their keys or risk wasting future opportunities. A limit on keys pushes the system back towards decision making rather than passive accumulation. Failure needs to matter. If attempting a rift has no real downside, there's no real risk and therefore no real sense of accomplishment. But if the punishment is too harsh, people will just avoid the system altogether. There has to be a balance here. If failing a rift means you fail the dungeon, that's okay. It keeps the challenge meaningful. It gives you real incentive to beat the rift and then go on to finish the dungeon. What matters is that the potential reward feels strong enough to justify the attempt. If players are going to risk the run, the reward for success needs to feel like it was absolutely worth the gamble. The final thing I want to say with regard to improving the rift system is that boss rotations need the right cadence. If bosses rotate too quickly, players won't have enough time to learn them, build teams for them, and feel a sense of progression. But if they rotate too slowly, the system could start to feel stale. Rotating the boss once a month seems like a good balance. That should give the average player time to understand the encounter, build an appropriate team, and see their rate of success improve over that period. It also gives content creators enough time to do a deep dive into each rift boss, explain the mechanics to their audience, and help players prepare before the next rotation begins. Overall, rifts are a strong concept. They add tension and variety, and they have the potential to make dungeon farming feel much more dynamic. But if the system is really going to work, it has to reward the right behavior. Rifts should be a challenge opportunity that rewards players for taking a calculated risk. As it stands right now, keys just feel like a bonus currency attached to dungeons that can be cashed in when you feel safe. The expected payoff is missing. The system is useful, but it is not as engaging or emotionally satisfying as it could be. If Fateless can tighten the incentives, keep some flexibility for player time, and make immediate engagement feel genuinely worthwhile, rifts could become one of the more interesting progression systems in the game. And really, I would love to see them get there. I know Fateless listens to its community, and I'm sure there are a lot of ideas about how to improve the system. These are simply my thoughts on how we could strike a better balance between the courage to engage and the emotional payoff that should make rifts exciting when they appear. I'm Gecko Mayhem, and I hope you enjoyed this video. I also hope you have a great day, and I'll see you on the next one.